Good evening and welcome to the August 26th special board meeting of the Ames Community School District Board of Directors. I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Beerbaum, seconded by Benken. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Director Rosser, will you please read the purpose statement?
The Ames Community School District commits to equity and access that empowers every individual to reach their full personal and educational potential.
Thank you very much. I will go ahead and open the public hearing on proposed plans, specifications, form of contract, and estimated total cost of the public improvement for the new high school bid issuance number 2. We did not have anyone sign up to speak. If anyone's interested in speaking. Seeing none, I will go ahead and close the public hearing. And I will go ahead and read our statement regarding public comments during our public forum. Residents of the district, students attending the district, parents or guardians of students attending the district, and district staff members may address the board about any topic relevant to the district, whether on the current agenda or not. Those who wish to speak must sign up at the beginning of the meeting. Speaker participation is limited to 3 minutes once per item. The views and opinions of citizens addressing the board do not necessarily reflect those of the board, district administration, or staff. Speakers are to remember that Iowa law prohibits the board from discussing specific employees, students, or their performance. Student speakers will state their name and school. Others will state their name and address. And first signed up this evening is Ben Dewey. Yep, go ahead and sit, and the microphone will be on.
All right, my name is Ben Dewey. I want to thank you for allowing me to speak here tonight. I am the head track and field coach at Ames High School. My 6th year as the head boys coach, 3rd year as the head girls coach. I am also a physical education instructor. I am joined here tonight from members of my staff and one athlete, Stephen Smalley, Kirk Schmaltz, and Gabriel Greenlee. I want to inform everyone that the Ames track and field program is a statewide brand. We have a top facility, we have the top teams, 2 of the top teams in the entire state, and we have the most historic track and field program in the state of Iowa. People follow us. When teams compete against Ames High in any sport, and specifically in this situation, track and field, they expect elite competition from their competitor, and we provide that. And on the return, they expect first-class facilities when they come and compete against Ames High. The number one reason I'm here is to hopefully indicate that we need a facility for the shot and discus, and it needs to be in by this spring, and that's the number one most important thing. I know there's a lot of deliberating and there's a lot of back and forth arguments, but the number one thing is for our athletes to have a place to compete this spring. Any type of facility would be nice, and I'll support whatever you guys come up with. But as I've been thinking over the last couple weeks as this has been going on, if Ames High Athletics, and specifically tonight the track and field program, is known to be the best, a temporary facility doesn't meet that expectation, in my opinion. No matter where our facility is, I have 100% confidence in our athletic director, Mr. Judge Johnston, Mr. Jerry Peters, and our track and field staff, myself included, that has spent the last 4 to 5 months developing in what we feel like is a perfect venue for our athletes and for our competition. With that being said, we have definitely taken in consideration the number one most important thing, and that is safety for our athletes and for the neighbors of the neighboring venue, wherever this venue will be. We have spent countless hours in meetings talking about how to keep our athletes and anybody in the community safe if it's off our school property, our high school school property. The second thing that we have put into this plan is logistically the right fit for our kids and our visiting competition. And lastly, And something that we're all proud of here at Ames is to make sure that it is aesthetically pleasing to our kids, to our staff, and to who we compete against. Like I said, I have 100% confidence that we as a staff, our administration, can come up with a very safe and presentable facility for our athletes in competition. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you. Stephen Smalley.
Hello. As Ben said, I am...
Can you give your name and address
Oh,
first,
yes,
please?
sorry. I'm Stephen Smalley, 2009 Hunziker Drive here in Ames. I am the throws coach for both boys and girls, going into my 6th year for the boys and 3rd on the girls' side. I'm going to answer a couple quick questions here that I've noticed from past school board meetings. Our practices begin around 4:20, 4:30 every day in the afternoon. We expect our student athletes to go to the weight room, get a lift in, and then we don't even start drill and throwing progression until around 4:30. With that being said, safety is also our #1 concern. We have one of the most safe facilities in the past. We take safety as a major concern. We teach our athletes and anyone around the area the importance of keeping your head up and looking around. With that being said, one of my main concerns about our temporary site for Northwood is location. It is over 1.5 miles away from the high school. It is quite a distance for our student athletes to get there, whether that needs to be a shuttle provided by the school district or by the coaching staff. With meets, this is a major concern considering many schools across our state, as this being a brand, come to compete against one of the best throwing programs in the state and one of the best track programs in the state. A lot of these schools have to have their throwers also run. And a concern of mine is getting the athletes to the throwing complex, back to the track, and back to the throwing complex in a timely manner that will not negatively affect any other thrower as well as that athlete itself. My concern being, how are we going to do this with it being 1.5 miles away? I don't see an answer to that, and that's concerning. It will take a significant amount of time to complete a throwing complex or to complete throwing events being that far away from the high school. Is Fellows a perfect place? No. But is it the best place for the situation we have? It might be. We have to do what's best for our student athletes as well. We have to have a throwing complex in place soon. We have 14 weeks before the ground freezes. Some sort of construction needs to begin. After March 1st, if we're not training outside, that's going to negatively impact the season for every student athlete and any athlete that has college goals. And it's not just going to affect the 25 to 30 student athletes that are in our program, but 170 that go out for track and field. Thank you.
Thank you. Gabe Greenlee.
My name is Gabe Greenlee, and I'm a junior at Ames High School. So, the first point I would like to bring up is the success of our programs in the past. In 2018, we got third at the state championships. In 2019, we got second. And more specifically, in the throwing half, we consistently put out district champs, conference champs, state qualifiers, and state place winners. And I truly think that this program is the reason I kind of went from like a middle schooler with some potential to one of the best throwers in the state and in my age group in the country. And the second point I would like to address is the urgency of the situation. We have our first outdoor practice on March 1st, and it's hard to train to beat the best or train to be the best when you don't have a facility. And the third point I would like to address is the importance of the program to me. So beyond competing and winning as a team, the program has opened me up to meeting new people that I didn't know, like from different walks of life that I couldn't have experienced anywhere else. The Ames High's track and field program is really important, and sorry, I kind of blanked.
Just take a breath.
That's okay,
Just
take a breath.
Big old
We're
deep
not
breath.
threatening people up here.
I guess back to the urgency of the situation. I also train all year round, and so right now, I mean, it's not that big of a deal, but I usually go to the middle school to train. The facility isn't quite as nice, so it would be nice for whether it's temporary or permanent, the new facility to be nice, also considering the amount of events we put on at the high school. We have the middle school state championships. Some years we have the district meet and the conference meet, so I think it's also important to have a nice facility. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Gabe. And congrats on all your success. Andrew Smalley.
Andrew Smalley, 5441 Rolling Drive, Ames, Iowa. Thank you for allowing me this time. Thank you for checking out my email, and for those of you that replied, I appreciate that very much. As a over 15-year supporter of Ames High Track and Field, my wife and I have been volunteers for that entire time. We volunteered before our son was in high school. We volunteered while he was in college, and in full disclosure, we still volunteer while he is the head throws coach at Ames High. First, I want to make sure that the board understands that fellows is really the farthest we could go for this unfortunate situation that we're having right now. Anything further than that would be exactly the same as asking our tennis team to play singles at 24th Street, but doubles matches will be held at the courts at Brookside. Or our swim meets, individual events will be held at the Ames pool, but all relays will be held at the Furman Aquatic Center. This is one team. They do many different things. It's not simply a throwing competition while people are running track. It's a track and field competition. In watching the first meeting on YouTube, one thing that was brought up was safety with public use. And I'd like to take a moment to address that. Most public people that would be using that facility, first of all, they wouldn't have access to the school's shot put and discus. They would be locked up. They'd have to have their own. These cost anywhere from $65 to $300. So most people that do it are at the master's level competition. They're going to go someplace like Iowa State University because that's where they would compete when they're competing in a master's competition. The other reason they'd go to a facility like that is because the people in this sport understand that safety is paramount. And they're not going to be throwing in an area that could potentially have children when there isn't a meet going on. and isn't going to have security areas set up, not just for their protection, but also for those people that might be watching them. This group of athletes that we have right now, some of the best in the state, quality young men and women, it's paramount that we get this facility started. If you look at the agenda, I've seen that the shortest time frames we're looking at is 12 weeks. If we don't get this started and started tomorrow, we run the jeopardy of not having a place to compete. That's inexcusable. I can't believe we'd ever even consider not offering this option. I would love during the time that we have later on, if there's any questions that I could answer as an official covering safety, as having been a volunteer coach in how we address safety and make sure the areas are safe. I'd love to be able to answer that for you. Please call on me. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up is Kurt Schmaltz.
I almost muted it that time.
My name is Kurt Schmaltz. I live at 2303 Hayes. I was an employee of the district for 35 years. Was a head track coach at Ames High School for the girls program and head cross country. I listened to the purpose statement. I saw Gabe throw as a freshman. The reason why he's where he's right now, because he had an excellent facility to throw at. It wasn't something makeshift. I look at this boardroom. I used to see where you used to meet in the back of the high school in the multi-purpose room. I look at the tennis courts. I look at the baseball field. I look at the softball field. And each one of those are first-class facilities. I look at the turf on the football field. I look at the track. The throwers deserve just as good as facility. If they don't have, they're going to feel like not as good. It's an important part of track and field. You try to build a team together with track and field, okay, and to be able to take care of that. I look at it says Ames Community School District. It doesn't say Ames High School. On the track, we have a gate. There's all kinds of elementary kids, parents, community members use that track 24/7, okay? So I know there's been some concern about Fellows. It's not Fellows Community District just for them. It's Ames Community School District, and what can we do best for everybody? We can make it work, okay? There's a way to make it work. That's what I love about being in this community. We're going to find a way to make it work for everybody so everybody can meet their purpose. We don't want to have to bus people. We don't want to have to transport people. We want the logistics to work out. We've got smart enough people and enough money in this district to have a first-class facility for everything. And I would rather see us work together rather than saying, this is my territory, and to do that so we have the best for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Todd Clint.
Hello, I'm Todd Clint. My address is 3328 Weston Drive. And though I live in the Gilbert district, I do open enroll my kids, and I've got a couple kids at Fellows. And I was fortunate enough to be at the July meeting about this a couple weeks ago. Got to see the Jeff and Judge and Jerry show live. It was good. I learned a lot. Second row seats, not the best, but it was pretty good. Learned a lot that night, and there wasn't a lot of people there, like Jerry mentioned last time. It was a holiday week. It was the 2nd of July. We didn't find out about the meeting until the week before. We got the email from Infinite Campus on the 25th. So I think one of the lessons learned is when we have a decision this big, maybe get a little more information out, try not to schedule it on holiday week. Jerry mentioned that when he left the meeting, he felt like we weren't really against the idea. And I think as the few of us that were there, there was a lot of information. You know, we had a one-sentence description of what the meeting was going to be about, and we sat there and got a lot of information for a good 45 minutes. I don't think we knew how we felt when we left that meeting, so it's not fair for Jerry to try to figure that out. I think he was probably legitimately surprised when he heard there was pushback, because we didn't know what we thought. Hadn't had a chance to really ruminate on it, give it much thought, talk to other people, kind of compare ideas, and I think that's kind of where some of the pushback comes from. So another lesson learned is maybe when we're having these kind of decisions, give the affected people a little time, maybe time for some feedback. Every Fellows parent that I talked to after that meeting was in favor of the temporary option. Not a big fan, but they understand that, you know, the athletes got to practice and we all are going to put a little bit into this, and everybody was good with that. But to a person, none of them were excited about the permanent plan, and for a variety of reasons. There was safety reasons, traffic reasons. A lot of folks didn't want to lose green space for something that didn't directly benefit current fellow students. So there was a little bit of that out there. But we all wanted to help. I mean, we get the thing. It's a big school, and the breadth of the opportunities in the school district are part of the reason that I open and enroll my kids here. I mean, I want these opportunities. I want the shot put. I want the discus. I want all that stuff. And so all the parents that I talked to were in favor of trying to help somehow, but this particular solution wasn't one that really resonated with them. And that's probably why you've seen some pushback. Finally, I do want to say to the gallery, people watching at home, hit like, subscribe, whatever. But when I found out about this issue, I did reach out to some of the directors and express my concerns, and I got a very warm welcome. We've got a great board here, very thoughtful, very well-intentioned, and so I felt better talking. Don't always get my way. Some days you're the bug, some days you're the windshield, you don't win them all. But I've never had a discussion with a board member that I didn't feel better afterwards. So I encourage anybody that's got opinions to voice them.
Thank you. Chase Abner.
Good evening. My name is Chase Abner. I live at 1330 Roosevelt Avenue. My wife and I have 2 kids at Fellows Elementary and 1 freshly at the Ames Middle School this year, so we're in a new phase. We've been a part of the district for 4 years, and over that time it's been really easy to trust and follow the leadership of the district, and we're very thankful for that. It's not the experience we've had other places, so we're very thankful. You have a very hard job. You have the difficult task of helping 5,000 or more students reach their full personal and educational potential. And among those 5,000 students, they each have specific challenges and needs and strengths that they bring to that equation. And they have families that have a variety of expectations of what the district should or shouldn't do on behalf of their kids. So I understand it's impossible for the district to make decisions that's going to make everybody happy. It's just not going to happen. And that's why I admire that you volunteered for this job of trying to make decisions that are best for the most students and that really pursue those goals as stated on the wall. So I keep that in mind. I try to remain grateful and avoid entitlement when you make decisions that don't best fit me and my preferences or those of my family. However, that requires trust. And in the case of the shot put and discus field project, I believe that trust has been weakened because the district hasn't taken proper steps to communicate with the appropriate stakeholders. Yes, there was a July 2nd meeting that was only publicized to a portion of the Fellows community. It wasn't listed on the district website. It wasn't in the social media feeds of Fellows Elementary or the district. And then a flyer was distributed to only 50 homes adjacent to the Fellows property. Again, this only solicited input from a small percentage of stakeholders. I was not one of them. And finally, Exhibit A in the packet for tonight's meeting misrepresents the feedback of the community about the project, particularly as it relates to the Fellows property and to the 24th Street locations. For instance, in the cons for the Fellows permanent location, it only lists elementary after-school use. But if you look at the feedback in Exhibit H, you'll see that there are several more concerns that aren't mentioned there, including concerns about traffic, parking, and loss of green space. And nowhere on the pros of the 24th Street location does it mention the fact that it would be a great benefit not to have to take land or property or space from 500 plus elementary students at Fellows. So it's not my preference for the field to be constructed at Fellows, but my greater concern is that the district has failed to communicate well with our community on this project, and it's weakened the trust we need to have a positive and proactive relationship in our educational choices. So I have a couple of questions that I hope will be addressed later on when this agenda item comes up. One question is, why did this become an urgent situation? As some of the other speakers have mentioned, we have to make a decision now. The new high school project has been talked about for years and years and years. And if the district truly values our sports programs like track and field, why wasn't this taken care of? the sense that it's urgent forces us to make decisions quicker amount of time and involve less people, and I think that's what brought us where we are today. And I also like to know why the construction costs are 4.5 times greater to build at 24th Street. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, that ends our public forum this evening, and I will go ahead and move on to the action items. And for our first action item, the new high school bid issuance number 2, I'm going to ask our construction team to come up and help us understand the process and where we are tonight in this point of our project.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and start it off. We're really excited. This is really a time for celebration. We're going to build a brand new high school. We're going to do something for the community, for Ames, that is a once-in-a-lifetime experience as far as doing this new high school. There's been a lot of people that have been working on this for quite a while. I think I've been involved in this project for at least 8 years. I think probably Luke is probably closest with people in the room here that have been working on it that long too. So it's really exciting to see all this hard work with our Kristen Lewis with OPN and Dean McCormick are part of the team that have kind of helped to make this, pull this project together. So I want to go ahead and have Dean kind of explain the process that we went through just to kind of bring us all up to speed as far as the bidding process and vetting the bids and so on. And we'll go ahead and proceed with that and answer questions later.
Yeah. Can we, is it possible to get the estimated project cost summary exhibit up? Can you do that? We'll start at maybe at the high level, and then we can.
We've got it here.
No, that's not it.
JD has it.
JD has it, Jerry.
He wants
Is that the board summary?
The fourth one.
The board summary.
Oh, the other one?
It's the bottom right. Yeah.
Very good, thanks. So I guess, first of all, I think we're really pleased to report that on bid day, we ended up with bids that were approximately $3.1 million below our budget. So, yeah. So what you see in front of us is the budget that reflects those adjusted bid amounts. So you've seen this before. This is the format that you've seen. So we've taken that $3.1 million in savings and we've reallocated it within the project budget. And so one, we purchased all of the ad alternates that were part of the project. So we'll plan to award all of those ad alternates. There were a number of deferred cost items that we identified through the construction document phase, and as a strategy to control costs if necessary. We're pleased to say we'll be able to purchase all of those deferred cost items as we move forward. And the other, we had reallocated to a potential alternate fund source some of Jerry's costs and starting up the high school. We've restored all of that funding. And we did add $500,000 to the contingency, which puts us into a range that feels really good and really comfortable. So that's sort of the overall. So when you look at the bottom line, we're actually just under the $137 million budget for the high school at this point. So we're really happy with that. I think the bid day, we had a good bid response from the bidders. When we were here, I think before we said we would hit the market, we would place calls, we would make visits, and we did. We hit the market very hard. We phoned them, emailed them, showed up in their office to try to encourage them to bid, and I think we had good response from the market. We had multiple bids in almost every category, every bid package. We had a few packages where we ended up with only a single bidder. That was a surprise to us in most cases, but in those cases, we were within expected budget range. So I think that's really the report on this. I'd be happy to take any questions or discuss anything else about the bidding process.
Questions for Dean or Kristen or Jerry?
Well, first of all, thank you for OPN and Story. I think you did a great job walking us through this whole project to this point. So very happy with your work and highly recommend you to other school districts around the state. The one thing I think it's worth noting too is that little asterisk, there's $4.3 million left that has to go into issuance 3. So to me, there's quite a bit less risk to the school district that we're going to be over budget because the sheer amount that was in issuance number 2. So again, I commend your work, very supportive, glad we're up to a 3.3% contingency for unknown items, and just really happy, and it's a great day for our community to be able to put this forward.
Any other questions? All right, I will go ahead and entertain a motion then.
I move the board award the 18 contracts for bid packages indicated in the Ames High School bid issuance number 2, recommended award summary for base bid and alternates 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6.
Second?
It's been moved by Deerdorf, seconded by Beerbaum. Discussion.
Yes, I'd like to move this time to separate bid 4-1, just so we can discuss it separately, vote on it separately. I just have a few questions regarding that one.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, moved by Rosser, seconded by Benkin to remove bid 4-1 separately for discussion. You want to go ahead and ask your questions? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, we
Maybe.
can do the whole other motion and then take this one up, or do you want to take this one up first and then do that? It's up to you.
I was going to treat it as an amendment. Right, so go ahead and vote on it as an amendment.
Discuss the amendment.
To discuss the amendment, so we need a vote to discuss the amendment?
You don't need a vote, you just would discuss the
Yeah,
amendment.
I know, that's why I said, what questions do you have? Yeah, so if we treat this as an amendment, we go ahead and discuss the amendment right now, which is, an amendment has been to pull bid 4.1.
Correct.
Okay, so all those in favor of polling bid 4-1 indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those against say nay. Okay, passes 7-0. So we will go ahead and vote on or discuss the initial motion, which was moved by Deerdorf, seconded by Beerbaum. Any discussion?
My only other comment was for the public, but the reason we have some alternates is because when we went through the value engineering phase, we wanted to identify potentially what we could pull back on should our estimates come in high. So the scope of the project hasn't changed from originally what we wanted. This just puts it all into one lump sum.
And also to point out, and I think you kind of alluded to it, but could you be a little more specific about where your estimate of the bids were and where they ended up coming in? If you could just kind of share that with the public. That's on that other form. It's not on this one. JD, if you could switch over to that one. Yeah, I think that's a good, valuable information for, I found it interesting, and I'm sure the public will too.
Yeah, so the sum of the bids that we received, including the alternates, was $90,727,059. That compared to our base bid estimate of $93,850,000, or about that's 3.1 million below our estimate. So
they came in 3 million and some change less than what you had anticipated.
Correct. Yes, yes.
That's great. That's great. Especially, I have to admit, during this period of time, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but construction is going pretty good right now. And, getting people to even put in bids is not an easy thing. And I appreciate the work that you guys did in getting those bids in. So I think having your estimates come in and that difference being a negative rather than a positive really relates to the hard work that you guys did, the architect, OPN, and in putting together realistic estimates, but also the hard work you did in reaching out to those contractors to get those, to really sharpen their pencils and get those bids in. Thank you.
I think the last thing I would say is I really want to emphasize how much of a celebration this is and thank all of you. You've been great to work with, and we have pushed and pulled however many months that we've been working on this. So I just really want to let you know how much I appreciate that, and celebrate as a community the point that we are at in this process and the opportunity that we have in front of us tonight. So, any further discussion? So it's been moved by Dierdorf, seconded by Beerbaum to award 17, so it would be adjusted, 17 contracts for bid packages indicated in Ames High School bid issuance number 2, recommended award summary for base bid and alternates number 1, number 3, number 4, number 5, and number 6. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Okay.
Okay.
Do I have a motion?
Well,
Which,
we need somebody to move to approve that one. Go ahead.
Go for it. You have it then.
Okay, I'll move to approve the bid package 4-1.
Second.
so it's been moved by Rosser, seconded by Beerbaum to approve bid package 4-1. Discussion.
Yeah. So I just have some questions regarding, we've had communicated to us some concerns regarding that particular one, the bid that you got and the bid that you're recommending from the Midwest Masonry Incorporated. First of all, were they the only bidder for that?
We had 3 bidders.
Okay, you had 3 bidders. And theirs was the lowest, or?
Theirs was the lowest.
Theirs was the lowest. What other factors then, because part of the rationale in determining it's not just the lowest, but also the most, what's the term, reasonable or responsible also? Reasonable and responsible, I think the other terms that are used.
Responsive and responsible.
Thank you. So part of the concerns that have been raised is, be honest, the quality of their work. And how did you then gauge their quality of their work compared to the other bids?
So let's back up just a half a step here.
Okay,
So
go ahead.
There are 2 standards that are applied to the public bidding law. One is responsiveness and one is responsibility. So responsive means, did you submit your bid correctly? And they were responsive.
Okay.
The correction I would make is that the award isn't to the most responsible bidder, it's to the lowest responsible bidder.
Right.
So the standard there is to determine whether the bidders are responsible or not. In this case, all 3 bidders we would judge to be responsible. In other words, there's nothing in their past that would indicate they are not capable of doing this project. There's several ways to establish that. One of the ways to establish responsibility is, were they able to get a bid bond which says, are they bondable from a performance standpoint? So they did, their bonding company was willing to give them a performance bond. So that's probably the first step in responsibility. It's also an element of responsiveness, but it's in responsibility. So when we receive bids, we will look at those bidders, and in this case, we were familiar with most of the low bidders. There were 4 bid packages that we were not familiar with their work, so we sent out a contractor qualification statement for them to fill out and respond to us. Then that includes things like, what's the background of your company, how long have you been in business, how many employees do you have, provide some reference jobs. We ask them who they'll assign to the project, and how they'll manage the project.
Was this one of them that you sent one of those questionnaires?
We sent this out to Midwest Masonry.
Okay.
When we received their questionnaire back, we visited with some of their references. In this case, we got predominantly good references, not 100% good. There were some issues noted with quality, but I would say we would get those types of issues with almost any contractor that we would see. And by the way, that's why you have people like Story Construction and OPN to watch over the quality on that. We checked with their references. The references that certainly were good. And so then we met with them. We met with them last Thursday. And we had them come in. We sat down with them in our trailer out at Ames High and specifically talked with them about how they were going to approach the job, what their plan was, what resources that they have available to dedicate to the project. And that meeting was a good meeting. Their plan was in sync with the way we saw the project. They talked about the level of manpower and what they had to do it, how long they thought they would take it, and all of those checked out favorably. So I'd say we vetted them, and we believe they've met the standard of responsibility.
Okay. And is part of that that evaluation safety records, or do you go into that at all, or is that one of the questions that were
We talked
related?
about safety,
Okay.
and we outlined our expectations for safety.
Okay. And then lastly, you alluded to it, the manpower, people power. Are they going to have the resources of the workforce to, in your
They've
expectations, to
indicated they
get
have the
that,
resources
get the
to
work done on our time frame, not theirs?
Yes, they've indicated they have the resources. We went over the schedule and the expectations for production in relative detail, and they've indicated they have the staffing and the manpower available to do that job.
Okay.
This job.
Okay, thank you.
I have a couple of questions. So, of all of the bid packages that were received, how many did you vet?
Well, we vet them all.
You vetted all of them, so how
Yeah.
many did you vet?
18 that we're recommended award
Okay.
today.
Of those 18,
We sent, and I'll just clarify, we sent the contract qualification statement to 4 of them. And those were the 4 that we weren't familiar with their company and didn't have significant past experience.
thank you. So of those 18, how many have you had complaints about from their unions?
Complaints from their unions. I guess bid package 4-1 is the only one that we have heard from the business agent for their union.
And so for you and your experience and your history and all of the expertise that you and your team bring to this project, is it common or uncommon that a union would reach out to a potential employer about problems with one of their tradespeople?
Or problems with another contractor in the industry. It happens occasionally. I would say it happened. The Masons are one of those that it happens with maybe more frequently than
This
others.
particular scenario?
Yes, yes.
And so, do you have an explanation for why that might happen?
Obviously, there's a union, non-union competition for projects that occurs in the industry. And
Is
that's
that-
the only explanation that I would.
So what you're suggesting is that this particular Midwest Masonry is a non-union entity,
They are non-union.
and so it's
open
your
shop contract.
belief that the source of the complaint is just competition?
Yeah, I think that's a fair assumption.
Okay. That was helpful. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. It was moved by Rosser, seconded by Beerbaum to approve bid package 4.1. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay.
Nay.
Passes 6-1. Thank you very much. right, moving on to the personnel report, I will entertain a motion.
I move the board approve the personnel report of August 26, 2019 as presented.
Second.
Moved by Beerbaum, seconded by Rosser. Discussion? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Next item, the comprehensive assessment plan for 2019-2020.
I move the board approve the district proposed comprehensive assessment plan for 2019-20 school year.
Second. Moved by Rosser, seconded by Perez. Discussion? I'm going to have Jeff come up and just provide one quick clarification for everyone on recent information.
Thank you. Excuse me for my cough. We learned late last Friday after the cap had been presented in board notes that Iowa will no longer be offering the Iowa Algebra Readiness Assessment, which was submitted to you as part of the cap. We will need to find another way to assess our students in algebra in order to offer them opportunities to advance in their curriculum, and we're working on that now. I wanted to be very transparent about that was a change between when we submitted that on Thursday and what you're looking at tonight.
Thank you. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, it was moved by Rosser, seconded by Perez. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. On the shot put and discus field project, I'm going to ask staff to come up. We had some additional information that came to us since our last meeting, and so similar to so take it away, Jeff.
All right. I don't know if it's possible. I think if I plug this in, you can see my screen. Is that correct?
It's good on mine.
Do you want JD to show it?
I've got it.
Oh,
Here, I want to show this.
he wants it.
Let's see if this works.
So you have to disconnect.
Because this will outline for you what those changes are, and then we can discuss or answer any questions you might have.
That'd be great.
Okay, so again, just for the sake of transparency to the board and to the community, there were some changes to that packet after submission on Thursday, and I wanted to outline those changes so that we, again, we're being transparent and open about the entire piece of information. So, while some of them may seem trivial, I'm going to outline everything just, again, out of full transparency. So one of the changes was the options would have been listed in the packet online as A, B, C, D, going down Exhibit A. The thinking was that might be a little confusing to read since the exhibits and the options were both lettered, so there was a change to that just for the ease of reading. Page numbers were added to that packet, again, for the ease of reading. There is updated language on option number 3. Late Friday, we got communication from a facilities manager at Iowa State University that is listed under option 3 now. So the language of that is listed under option 3, which is different than what we had prior to Friday. On option 8, there is some updated language as well. After many careful reviews of the property west of the stadium, it's been determined that we can only fit a discus facility at that location, so we've updated that option. Of course, we wanted to provide the most updated information we possibly could to the board on the results of the neighborhood survey. So those updated results were given to you. And then also on option 8, the word protected was removed from the language on option 8. So that would summarize any and all changes made to this plan.
Do you have that updated
Yes,
document
ma'am.
on your? Thank you. And I think, JD, don't you have the updated document so we can put it up for the public? Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim.
You're very welcome. Yep, and the updated packet is available
Yeah.
for changes. Yep,
Thank you.
you're very welcome.
Thank you.
Jerry, would you, the mic, have him hold the mic closer?
Sorry. Hold the mic closer.
Yes.
Because you can't hear me.
Yeah, I can't hear
It's
very good.
horrible. Not a problem.
Oh, that's true.
Is it okay if I grab my water?
Yes.
Thank you.
Anything else from staff before we allow the board an opportunity to ask some questions? Anything? Any questions from the board, from our staff members?
I have a question. I am really unclear how Northwood ever got involved in this. This seems ridiculous to me. Can you help me understand how this is in any way a viable consideration?
That was my fault. I like to do brainstorming, so that was a brainstorming idea that I'd come up with, and basically it was kind of the next thing as a possibility. And we were looking at opportunities or options, kind of to move, expand our thought process. So Northwood is somewhat flat and level. It's a preschool instead of an elementary school, so it offered some opportunities. I kind of threw it out in the air, and it got some traction, so we went ahead and looked at that.
Is it still a viable option from your perspective today, sitting
Yes.
here? It is still a viable option?
We can build a shot put and discus field on the Northwood property.
How would the problems that would cause you to go to Northwood be remedied? Because my sense is you've been pushed off from fellows by community outrage. So why would that not be the case at Northwood as well, given that they're younger children, it's farther away, they have no parking? I'm not sure how this is any better.
Well, I think it's a different use of the facility. We don't have the preschool kids don't come out there after school. So once at the end of the school day, then they typically will go home. They're just gathered up, and then so they don't use. I don't think that field's used as much.
I think it would be remiss not to, I'm so sorry, my voice is not very good, not to point out that would create difficulties for sure for athletes who might compete in another event. So I think that's important to keep in mind within the program. You have athletes that compete in other events. So for competitions, having kids, student athletes be at Northwood and then get back to the high school might be difficult.
Well, I can appreciate and respect that. I think my concerns are safety concerns. I think that anytime you take a child off of the campus, the farther away they go, the more likely it is something bad that can happen. And so I don't know why we would even consider this as an option. I just wanted to understand, because I never really understood where it came from, so I appreciate that. I guess my next question would be, because you had mentioned something about after-school use, so who is using fellows after school?
During the school year, or any time, or currently, or?
You pick which you want to tell me.
Do you want to answer that?
I drove by today, and
I think what we've been told, the community, the neighborhood uses that area, as well as ACPC.
Correct. The ACPC program has, I would say, anywhere between 50 and 75 kids that would use that facility. They have both programming before and afterwards. In addition, it is a fairly vibrant neighborhood park. I mean, part of what the city utilizes our facilities for is for a park-like atmosphere too. So those are, I'd say, the primary people using that facility.
Is ACPC a district-run
No.
program?
No.
No, who funds that?
Students pay tuition. They pay a fee to go to ACPC.
Yeah, so it's an independent nonprofit that's supported by the city, but you pay a fee it's in essence daycare for before and after.
And it's a partnership between the school district.
Yeah, we have an
and
agreement.
them. It's not something, right.
So,
I apologize for interrupting you, Director Bacon.
Go ahead.
I would be remiss if I didn't speak for the respondents because I've had the chance to read through all 50 respondents. Several of the respondents to the survey indicated that they do use, I would just say personally, they use that property.
well, okay, I'll get to your 50 respondents in just a minute. I guess my next question then is, what is our policy related to use of school district facilities after school hours? Who has priority according to our policy?
The district.
Excuse me?
The district.
The district has priority based on our policy. So it's not a park, right? It's a school that is paid for by all taxpayers. And so based on our policy, our students who are engaged in a school-based activity take priority over community use. Is that correct? Is that what our policy says?
Rather refer to the policy rather than speak off the
That
top
would
of
be
my head.
great.
Would you like me to look
Yes,
that up?
please.
Yeah.
Jerry, you should know, you know that policy.
Maybe while Jeff's looking that up, do you have another question?
Yes, so I appreciate that you all went and knocked on these 50 doors, or however many you knocked on, and I appreciate that people took the time to answer your questions and give us this feedback. I do feel like I want to say that from my perspective, this is really not useful information. This is certainly not scientific. This is not, this is at best anecdotal information. There certainly isn't a decent number of respondents to be able to make any kind of extrapolations about what a particular community might think. So for me, these responses aren't necessarily compelling. But I guess what I want to ask is, in general, how much sway do we give people who just happen to live close to the school in a district-wide decision? What's our general practice?
I apologize, I can't speak to our general practices. I'm 2 months on the job. But I do appreciate the fact that you've reminded us that we asked and distributed 50 flyers because we were asked to get the feedback of the immediate neighbors bordering the property. So it was not...
Who asked you for that?
Yeah, actually, we do have a history in this school district of getting the input of those in our community, especially those that are in the neighborhoods of where we have our schools.
Director Rosser, I appreciate that, but I'm actually asking just the district right now. And so from the district's perspective, I'm interested in hearing your perspective.
As far as our history?
Yeah. So Jerry might be able to answer.
A significant project that we've done to elementary school was over at Edwards. We did developed a play field over there, and I don't remember blanketing the neighborhood or anything. We worked with the building. We decided what we needed to do in order to be able to expand that playground area, and went ahead through the process of getting the PEPL committee approval, and then we went ahead through the bidding process and the construction. And I hadn't, as far as being able to pull the neighborhood or even the school, that wasn't part of that process.
So you didn't, that's not no. And so who actually funds that school, the grounds, who funds that? Is it just the fellows, is it just the families who have children who are routed to fellows who fund that facility?
No, we'll fund this through the PEPL account, physical plant and equipment levy.
And so where does that money come from?
It's from taxes.
From all of us?
Yes,
right?
the community
And so why, I'm just curious, if you were going to go through the trouble to ask what people thought, why would you only ask for the perceptions of the people who kind of live the closest?
we were asked to do that. We were directed to do that.
But it's a decision that really affects really the whole community. Is that fair to say?
Based on the funding source, yeah, it's a community funding source.
Okay. All right. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Jerry, when was the last Pebble meeting?
I think it
I'll
was
give you a few minutes
in
to
May.
look it up. Sure, in May, okay. At that time, this proposal was first thrown out. Okay, none of the board members nor any of the members of the Pebble Committee had any idea about this. And at that time, was there a reference to communicating with the Fellows community, meaning not just these parents and students, but also the neighborhood?
I'm not sure how clearly that was defined as to the extent, but we were asked to be able to...
Was there a discussion about that in May at the Pebble
Yes,
meeting?
Yes.
Thank you. So it wasn't just at our last board meeting that this came up. This was something that was discussed, suggested, and encouraged at the Pebble Committee meeting at that time, which consists of administrative staff of this district and members of the community as well as board members, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so this is not something that just came up in the last couple weeks. This happened and was first notified to you as a member of that committee and the other members of this district to take those necessary steps and get that input from those stakeholders, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. So first I'm going to start off by saying this shouldn't have been urgent. We shouldn't be sitting here in late August, okay? This, like I said, all of a sudden came up to us in the Pebble meeting in May.
June
It should have been brought up an awful lot sooner, and we wouldn't be talking about urgency now. So I'm very frustrated with the fact that we've been working on this high school project for a long time. We've spent lots of time focusing on lots of other athletic programs. We've done a great job. OPN story, are they still here? We spent hours and hours looking at all the nitty-gritty details. And how this one fell through the cracks is unfortunate, but it did. And since then, we've done a really bad job of communication, okay? We've done a really bad job, so we need to own up to that and realize the fact that that's where we are today. And that's what I'd like to express. You know, it's something that I brought up in May. We brought it up, we thought it was being taken care of, and we kept dragging on and on and on. The proposal never got to us until all of a sudden August, and now, oh, we got to do it, and this is the only place it's going to go, and there are no other options. Because that's what we were told at that last board meeting, basically. And that's when we said, wait a minute. We set up here without the expertise of many others that know the sport or know facilities building and others, and said, well, what about this place? Or what about that place? Or what about this place? And all of a sudden, through that, we came up with an entire list of options. So I'm going to get off my soapbox now. This is where we're at. Let's have a good conversation about where we go forward from here. But it's a real shame that we got to this point the way we did. I'll begin by saying my goal right now is, obviously we need to get something, and I completely support getting something for our athletes by March. It's just a matter of where. And I will throw out that my preference is overall, when all is said and done, when the high school is done, is on the current campus somewhere. Whether that means west of the stadium, on the west end of the stadium, if we can make that work, or if it doesn't work because of the prairie, then if we can make it work elsewhere on the campus, great. However, you know, we've got some time to work with that. But for next fall, that's not going to necessarily work. So my suggestion then for next fall is getting the pencil out and getting it done and putting it at our 24th Street property at the north end, temporarily. Or as we investigate the campus, if we find that the campus over the next year or two, as we're getting close to finishing that project, isn't viable, then we build the permanent facility here on the 24th, on the north end of the 24th Street area. That way, you know, we have the time to work with. But I really think that that's what we should have done in May, to be very, very honest, because I'm going to recommend before, after this scenario, that that this board, going forward from this point, approve all hiring of architects for this district, because we shouldn't be running out and hiring architects to draw up plans like we see for the work that was done and planned for fellows until we've approved it by the board. I know no other governmental body in this county that does that. The county board doesn't do it. The city council doesn't do it. The hospital board doesn't do it. They don't hire architects. Staff doesn't hire architects until the boards approve which way they're going. So I don't want to hear these twos, well, we can't do it up there because the architectural drawings are already done and we need flat space and blah, blah, blah. Well, that's not true. We've got land up there. Yeah, we'll have to move around some dirt to get it done, but if that costs us a little bit more money, sure, it's probably going to cost more money because we have this urgency all of a sudden. But I think that's the best temporary location. If it ends up being the permanent location, great. If we can't work something out on campus, that's where I'd like to go.
Could I just ask a question about what Director Rosser said? I just want to understand I want to try to understand what he's proposing. So is what he's proposing is option 7, which is the 24th Street property, is the estimated cost of $480,000, is that for a temporary or for a permanent?
That would be for permanent,
So if you built it on 24, it would be permanent?
yes.
Because what he's suggesting is that it be temporary here and then permanent at the high school. Do we have numbers of what a permanent, of what a temporary structure would be on 24th Street?
I can put some numbers together for that.
Because I guess if I'm just adding the numbers up, it comes up to $710,000. So I'm assuming it would be less than that.
So 24th Street cost analysis. I tried to be complete when we put these costing items together. I tried to include the cost for the temporary at Fellows as well as the demolition, the temporary one at another location, either Fellows or Northwood, and then be able to account for the demolition. So I want to get an idea of the whole comprehensive cost to do that. So if we build a temporary one that we can use for 3 years or 1 year, in this case I think it'd be 1 year, then that gives us the opportunity, the time that's necessary to be able to properly design and build the shot business on 24th Street. And then when that's completed, we'll have to go back and remove the temporary and restore that to its previous condition. So to do all that work is the budget that I had for the 24th Street.
I
as well
see,
as the West
okay.
Stadium.
So don't use that
that's
number then.
all cost
So we
of
don't really have at least a cost estimate for what Director Rosser is proposing, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I needed, okay.
So the trouble with trying to do the 24th Street is simply as we want to talk about or think about it, it's going to take time. It's going to take more time than what we have in order to accomplish that. It's not just throwing a shovel of dirt from one side to the other. There's a 9-foot difference in grade, elevation between the one end and the other. And so the advantage with being able to start off with a flat and level site is we can start constructing. But in the 24th Street site or the high school site, it's not flat and level, so it's going to take some time and effort to be able to get that site flat and level before we can build. And the building time of the shot put and discus is indicated as, I think we have about 12 weeks, is it?
I would just point out that the difference between flat and level and not is the primary factor that drives significant cost increase as well as significant time increase. And as you probably are well aware, when costs get above, I believe, $135,000 is what I was told, is when we have to go to bid, which then increase both time and cost as well. So it's really that flat level land component that is a major factor in both time and cost. So knowing that 24th is not flat and level, while certainly I would agree with Jerry that the estimate there would not be the estimate for a temporary one, I would suggest, and this is not a cost estimator terminology, but I would estimate it wouldn't be cheap.
Right. So I will point out
Director
that...
Rouser, can we please allow others an opportunity?
Go ahead.
Thank you.
I have some questions because unfortunately I missed the last meeting, so I apologize. I very much appreciate the information you put forward. And actually, I thank you for going out and getting some of the architectural drawings under on the standard contracts we have for that. I'm a visual person. I like to see the plans before I approve them, and realistically, I've never been on a board that would approve a construction project without an architectural plan. The question I have is really for Judge. I mean, we had a number of student athletes and coaches come forward. It seems to me, coming into this and thinking through things, that I would really love to find an option and possibly, move a motion later to direct the superintendent to work with staff to find the best option at the high school as part of the new construction, because it seems like that's really what would be best for the athletes and best for the coaches. Is that kind of where you're coming? I mean, perfect world, that's probably where you would like it?
In a perfect world, yes. But a month ago, 60 days ago, we were trying to wedge that thing in to a really tight site with a bigger footprint. It wasn't an option 60 days ago, per se. As questions started to come forward, the options started to increase or to look at different options. We asked the architect team a couple weeks ago to stretch that site, that job construction site, as much as possible and relook at it one more time. They did with some options. They came back with some options. But there's some domino effects for those 4 options that'll have to come into play. And I'll let Jerry address that if we want to talk about that.
Okay. Yeah, Jerry, does it look like now that may end up being a possibility?
As far as being able to,
have shot put and discus on the site and to take care of some of the original concerns you were worried about?
yeah, some of the challenges that we faced when we looked at the site was we had the site laid out, so the parking lot, the practice fields were laid out, we had the grades completed and contoured. There's also stormwater detention. The stormwater detention takes up valuable space, so the opportunity with that would be to construct an underground stormwater detention, then we could level that off. And so I think the area is there. It's going to take some finagling, it's going to take some work, but I think it is possible to be able to have it on that high school site.
Okay, and then I noticed in the previous meeting there was a lot of discussion about concerns relating to safety at Fellows and really at any of the options temporarily, because by definition a temporary facility isn't really set up for that purpose. From discussions and just walking by Fellows and even Northwood, it looks like we have fencing in place in ways we can keep that area secure, both, as we said, the student athletes and coaches, they're concerned about it, but also the community members. It looks like that should be possible, right?
Yes.
So you don't have any concerns there, and as far as I've seen on your plans, none of your plans even really have to add anything beyond the normal, like discus safety measures and fences, because those places already have good safety, correct?
In our discussions in the last 30 days, informal and formal, we've offered up additional fencing if it's needed to satisfy everybody's safety concerns, and some additional staffing, which I've come up with, or will have to come up with, to make sure we're all doing the right thing as far as safety. I do want to add one extra layer here. If we do have to explore the high school as a permanent site down the road, there's going to be some pretty good discussion there of moving things around, and there could be some cost increase with where we put the stormwater, where we reorient the practice field, how they fit, and the grades and all that Jerry and his world has to deal with. So that's a discussion that will have to happen.
Yeah, underground stormwater detention doesn't come at no cost. There is a significant cost. It's not thousands or tens of thousands, but it's more in the hundreds of thousands of dollars in order to be able to get that installed underground and create that flat space.
I did find that board policy if you're still interested in hearing it. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. It is Policy 905.1, community use of school facilities. I'll read you the first paragraph. It reads, "The district welcomes the public to use its facilities for approved purposes when such use does not conflict with the district mission, when the facilities are not being used for district educational programs and activities, and upon agreement for payment of rental charges that at a minimum ensure cost recovery." Later in the policy, it lists classes by which that rental will be prioritized, and the first class, level 1, is school-sponsored activities, followed then by other things. So at two different places in the policy, it references the district's priority for use for its activities.
What are those other levels?
Yes, sir. Level 2, volunteer youth-centered activities. Level 3, public activities supported by letter of agreement. Level 4, civic events. Level 5, other events.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'd just like to say I really appreciate the community's feedback through this conversation. I think that's one of our strengths of our community because they provide the feedback, and I'd say every Fellows parent and community member I've talked to, I think is being very reasonable and wants to help the district out and move this thing forward. Everyone I talked to, I mentioned there'd be inconveniences as we're going through this high school project, and they realize that. I guess as Director Bierbaum said, my preference would be having a permanent location at the high school based upon staff comments, based upon what is best for those student athletes. I think we should try to figure out how we can make that happen, whether it's through scheduling. I know that could be a challenge, Judge, what that looks like, whether it's underground storage, but I think we should try to review that in more detail. So I'd be supportive of the board approving a permanent location at the high school. We might not have the information to have that basis made on, but for right now, it's about the temporary location. And I think it provides quite a bit of certainty to especially the Fellows parents in that neighborhood if we were to put a temporary location there for them to understand that's not where we ideally want to be long term. I think it's kind of hard to make a decision without knowing what the long-term ramifications are at the high school, but it is a pretty big site. I think there's options, but my preference would be for us to move it forward, permanent location at the high school, temporary if it's at Fellows. I'm supportive of that, but I think we need to give some assurance to our community there.
Well, this is tricky. I hear you. I can see both sides. I can, in a way, it makes me feel that it's almost like us versus them, sort of like the neighborhood that, and when we're asking who uses the field after, it's the children, it's the students of the school that go there. So it's not that we're talking about random people. It's not. It's playing time is their extracurriculum activity, right? So I see both sides. I see the students that they don't want to be somewhere else. I get that, but I don't want us to pin a building against other buildings because that's not the issue. Like Director Dierdorf said, it, people have been very responsive. And initially I was almost thinking the temporary at Fellows was an okay decision for me. Now, I'm not super content with it just because the culture will change. So right now, kids play after school. And I think over time, they just won't play because that's just going to be not feasible for them. And I just don't want to be responsible for someone getting hit with something over the head. I just think it's very hard. They're learning how to do these things, right? So I think it's very hard that we're having to make this decision, like what students do we, like all this, there's no littles here because they can't speak for themselves. So I think it's really hard. I wish we had a better plan, but I'm struggling with this conversation.
Well, given some of the feedback and all of that, I would not be in favor of a permanent location at Fellows. Primarily because, well, you know, the parents and the kids, but also because of the safety of the high school students having to cross that street, you know, and the timing of it. There are inexperienced drivers driving down 20th Street. You know, there's some safety issues there. They don't always look, you know. you know what it's like driving around there. So I don't think that would be a good permanent location, but like Director Deerdorf said, you know, a temporary would not be terrible. I mean, it would be 7 weeks, right? So as long as safety is a big concern, which you've all expressed, then my only concern would be safety for the students safely getting there after school at the high school. And then I would really like to see a permanent location to keep the team together at the high school.
You know, one of the things that we've talked about through the planning of this high school is, as a community, we all have to kind of work through this to get to it. So we had to make sure people were aware this summer of all of the dump trucks with all of the dirt that were going to be coming through the neighborhood. We've talked about different ways that we're going to have to adjust parking at the high school and adjustments to the bike path. And we are doing something that many communities in this state do not get to do, and we're building a brand new high school. And what a great opportunity for us as a community, and tonight is a celebration because we're talking about a really hard discussion tonight because our community said move forward with a high school. So I appreciate everyone who's come up to speak tonight. I think the biggest thing that we have to remember that as a community, we know there are going to be sacrifices over the next 3, 4, 5 years as we all go through these pains of trying to get this high school built in the middle of a neighborhood, because it is. But what a fantastic place it will be when it opens, and it will be even better when we finish all the fields behind the high school once we get that portion finished. So I really want the community to really remember that we all have to sacrifice and figure out a way to get through this. I think for me, what I'm hearing, the comments of trying to figure out a way that we can permanently get it at the high school, I would love to be able to have our throwers be there at the track with the rest of the team. That's a way for their team to get around them and support them, understanding that this may cost a little bit more, but we as a board have a responsibility to figure out how we pull this entire project together, and this is a piece of it. I realize it is a sacrifice for that field over by fellows that is used in different ways, but I believe for the safety of our student athletes, to be able to accommodate them and make this sacrifice these next couple of years, I'm supportive of doing that as well.
Okay, so I would move that we direct the superintendent.
I didn't get my chance to.
Oh, you, okay.
I had questions, but I didn't get to share my thoughts. So I want to start off by telling just a quick story. I shared it with Jerry earlier. So this summer, I really needed just an hour of peace, and so I sent my kids up to Sawyer to go play at the park for a little bit, and they came home in like 20 minutes, and I'm like, what happened? And they told me they got kicked off the school property. And I said, well, why? And they said, oh, it's summer school. And at first I was annoyed, right? But then I was like, you know, everybody should get kicked out of something at one point in their lives. I think it keeps you humble. And second, they were right? The students who were in school, for the purpose that we are engaged in, didn't need to be distracted by my kids going to play, right? My kids, and then they just went and played somewhere else, right? The school district provides facilities to educate our students. That is our mission, that is our goal, it's our job, and the board is a fiduciary to make sure that we spend our money wisely in that purpose, right? And so I'm hearing the language here, and I appreciate that people feel conflicted or are struggling. I am not. I feel like this is very clear and very easy. I think the language that this is hard, that we're asking people to make a sacrifice, I just don't particularly hold that point of view. I feel that we have clear direction from our role as board members and fiduciaries to use the money wisely. I feel like we have clear instruction from our policy that it's actually our job to make sure that our students have priority use of our facilities. I think that I personally would never vote for a project that keeps these facilities off of the high school grounds permanently. I think that's ridiculous. We better make it fit, right? if you got to cut into the prairie, cut into the prairie. I don't care what you do. Like, it needs to be there. And I think that the idea that it just needs to go at Fellows, that's where it needs to go, right? It just needs to go there. So I would be in favor of a temporary facility at Fellows and a permanent solution at the high school.
Jerry, I have a question. The cost estimate for the temporary wherever Fellows, Northwood, flat level ground, I think that was the term you guys used, right? Flat level ground, is $65,000, right? So if we were to do the 24th Street north end of 24th Street, we're talking the additional cost would be to make it flat and level, correct?
As well as potentially parking if we wanted to. We were asked to
if it's
consider
temporary,
parking. Okay.
I don't even, I mean, it doesn't need to be paved. If it's temporary, a dirt lot up there, or better yet, there's plenty of street parking up there. Because we're not talking about a lot of use, right? Correct? Even during a, I do have a history of being a track dad. And I do know that other districts, when we've gone away to, they don't always have the shot put and discus at the site. It's at a different site, and they either have the event a little bit earlier, so those that are participating in that part and are also running in an event so that they can get back to wherever it is. I mean, that does happen. And I also want to point out that the distance, yeah, we're talking blocks. We're not talking miles from the high school campus to Fellows and then the high school campus to the 24th Street area. We're not talking a large distance here. Right now, as a matter of fact, here on 24th Street, we have, I believe, the cross-country team, obviously, the tennis team, the softball team, the baseball team, all use this facility. And they get here, they start practices at 3:30. Right as soon as school gets over, boom, they're over here and starting practice. So it's not that far from the campus. And again, my proposal is that we do it temporarily here, not permanently. My goal, I completely agree with the rest of the board, is that the permanent facility for this ought to be at the high school, on the campus, wherever it ends up. If you can fit it in, I think practice field's great, or the west end of the track, whatever, and we have to build another retaining wall like we have over by the concession stands, you know, whatever works. But we have time to figure that out. What we need to decide right now is the temporary location.
One of the things that I would just like to make sure that the board is aware of, because I know it was talked about earlier, and just to say that we work really hard to be transparent and to bring things to the board. On April 22nd, the board did approve architect services for relocating the high school shot and discus to Fellows Elementary site. That was approved by the board on April 22nd.
Okay, so
just to clarify.
Based on the discussion so far, I'd like to, I think we'll maybe split this. I would move that the board direct Superintendent Reisner to work with staff to find a way to get the permanent shot put and discus location at the high school as part of the ongoing high school construction project.
Second.
It's been moved by Beerbaum, seconded by Rosser, directing Superintendent Reisner to work with staff to find a way to fit the shot and discus course on the permanent high school plat.
Right. The permanent shot and discus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Discussion.
Judge, from a scheduling standpoint, if we can only get, say, discus figured out, is there a way to manage it on other fields?
At the high school permanent site?
Permanent site.
We need to keep them together for efficiency of our coaching staff and our athletes that share both of those events, which most do.
And I'm thinking like other sports, like soccer, or those other participants on those fields.
Then that's the next discussion we have about how we're going to twist fields and what size of fields we can fit in around this drainage issue, spacing. We might have to look at synthetic, because we might be doubling up on practice fields, and a small amount of green space we may have left may not be able to handle natural grass. And if we're going to double up and have to extend some of our soccer teams into that 5 to 7 p.m. range instead of that traditional 3:30 to 5:30.
So with the bids we approved tonight, we've got the synthetic field for the one practice field, correct?
That hasn't been bid. That'll be bid in issue
2003,
number 3.
okay, sorry. So that's out there, but that's part of the project,
Yes,
in the scope of the
Yeah,
project.
because we were under the estimate, we were able to put that money that we had allocated for the synthetic field in as a deferred item or into the bid package, so we got that in the budget. So that's within our 137 million.
Okay. I just appreciate your approach and trying to be flexible in how you navigate this whole thing, because it's not as easy as saying, this is a spot. We need to think how these decisions impact other sports.
Yeah, we have to have multi-use fields and fields that can handle a lot of activity in a smaller footprint athletically on that green space that's coming down the pike.
Thank you.
So we have a motion on the floor that was moved by Beerbaum, seconded by Rosser, directing Superintendent Reisner to work with staff to find a permanent location for the shot and discus on the new high school location. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0.
I guess one piece of feedback I'd have before we think about the next motion. I really appreciate the feedback from the community, not only from the students, but from the neighborhood, in that as I've talked to neighborhood members over the past month or so, which really just comes down to really Fellows parents, because a couple of my kids go to Fellows, I have found that all of them have been fully accepting with the idea of a temporary solution there, because I do understand that we're all in this together as a community. It's not one school against another or anything like that. I mean, the same kids that went to Fellows went to Meeker and went to everywhere else are now high schoolers and are throwing and doing all this together. So I think it's important that we make that clear, and that we don't end up with a situation where it looks like one neighborhood doesn't want something, because that's not the perception I've gotten in any of the feedback that I've gotten firsthand or with any of the people I've talked to. So I just wanted to bring that up, because I fully would expect that, like, the kids at Fellows will be there cheering on people in practice, saying, looking at that and wanting to throw a discus because they've never seen it before. I think that's awesome, if that's the way we go. I mean, if it's at Northwood, there'll be kids up there too,
I'd like to move that we put the temporary location at the 24th Street complex at the north end.
Second.
It's been moved by Rosser, seconded by Colton, to build the temporary location on 24th Street. Discussion.
So the reason I propose this, I think this is what should have been considered in the very beginning, in the first place. The idea should have been considered prior to May, when the concerns that were raised in the PEPL committee in May, it should have been reconsidered and obviously discussed in more detail, but it wasn't. It was those concerns were ignored. So moving forward, I think that's the best location temporarily. Yes, it may cost us more money, but all we need to do is get it flat and level. And I can't imagine that's going to cost us that much more money. We already have the plans. We already know what we want to build. We just need to make it flat and level.
I appreciate Director Rosser's points. I wish that it was, to me, it's a grade issue in understanding the grade and what needs to happen, or at least from what I'm understanding needs to happen to get it done, even on a permanent, I guess on a temporary capacity, right? There's still substantial work involved to get it prepared because of the grade issue, right? If you look at the price, if you look at the number of weeks, even temporary, from my perspective as a fiduciary, I don't understand why we would make that choice when there is another choice that to me seems more fiscally responsible. And so I worry when we talk about schools and prioritizing schools and this and that, I worry that we're really sending the board that we would rather spend an exorbitant amount of money than inconvenience a certain school.
Yeah.
And I don't want to send that message, because I don't believe that. I don't feel that. Just from my perspective as a fiduciary, I won't be able to support the motion.
As a fiduciary, actually, I take more serious the concern of the liability, that we knowingly are going to put a temporary facility in a place that we know young children are in the vicinity of on a regular basis every day. Okay, that is not the case on the 24th Street north end of this facility. There aren't young children playing in that area every day after school. So that's where, if we want to talk about fiduciary, that's a bigger concern. What if something does happen? No matter how many supervisors you have keeping kids away, watching what happens, all it takes is one mistake. All it takes is one problem, and now the district is liable for that child being injured and we knew darn well that we were putting a temporary facility in a place that basically said, yeah, we're going to take that chance that that's going to happen.
Is the temporary facility being considered at Fellows? Judge, are you considering doing practice where you would leave the gates open so students could come in? Basically, as Director Roster just brought up, we need safety to be paramount. Are small children going to be in the area of the shot and discus?
We've talked about additional fencing that maybe has some wide gates so that when we get into a practice setting, we can divide the playground with a physical barrier. Also a staffing barrier to help above and beyond our coaches to sit there and be the playground police to make sure everybody's in their areas, and also having a set of eyes and ears there as well. And we just made a great long-term decision here for the high school site, bringing our athletes back together. We're talking 21 to 28 weeks total, 7 weeks of spring. There'll be a couple days during those 7 weeks where our teams are going to be at track meets on the road, so that's going to decrease some of the frequency of the usage of that facility. And then we're trying, as some of you may know in some informal discussion, we're trying to get our cross-country teams to utilize this site more. And just in the last couple weeks, we started that trend. Now that our tennis courts are done and all the grading and all the construction equipment is out of the way, we now can get those athletes, roughly 130 to 40 to 50 of them up here to use this course more. So if we come up and do a temporary shot and discus at the north end of this court, that's now going to displace those athletes, and we're going to push that group of athletes back out onto the streets more because they don't have the Ames High current campus to run around on like they used to for some training. So we're going to displace a bigger group of athletes if we come up here. And the efficiency, the ambulance access, I don't feel very good about 24th Street.
Is there a way to safely at the 24th Street location have ambulance access?
At the north end?
Yeah, I mean, when I look at that, it's pretty isolated, and I don't know much about ground leveling except for what I did on Park and Rec, but it looks like there's some natural swells there, probably to protect from flooding and some other issues that are an issue up there. That's probably why it's so expensive, isn't it?
Yeah, there's some storm drainage up there that will have to be addressed as far as being able to manage the stormwater for the site, which is going to not only include cost but time. And with all this discussion on putting a temporary at 24th Street, it's not just simply said and it's done. It's going to take time, and that's what we don't have right now to be able to accomplish that.
Move that much good.
Any other discussion? It's a motion on the table. It was moved by Rosser, seconded by Colton, to construct a temporary shot and discus course on 24th Street. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Nay. Motion is defeated, 2-5.
I move to construct a temporary shot put and discus field at Fellows Elementary.
Second.
Question. I'm sorry, who seconded that? Perez. It's been moved by Bankin, seconded by Perez, to construct a temporary shot and discus on Fellows location. Discussion.
That's a question I have, and I think it's pretty obvious, but Judge, from the discussions you've had, safety is paramount. The athletes are saying safety is paramount. If you found that there was a safety issue or anything that caused any concern for the coaches or the student athletes that are throwing, you would remedy it or address it or find
immediately
some yet to known locate. I mean, technically, if there's something so horrible that it was last minute we found out, they could go to the middle school for a couple weeks until it's addressed, right?
It would be addressed immediately with decision makers that would have some say in that. No question.
I mean, the one comment I would have is I would say, as you're coming up with the plan, if we do go this direction, I would really hope that we can find a way to leave as much green space available as possible, because that area is used all the time and often. And I would hate to see us partition it off in such a way that for those weeks that it's not being used, that green space isn't fully available.
And that's, the original print that you've seen, we've tried to utilize and maximize that space by keeping as much as that playground where the bigger green space is currently. We've tucked that shot and discus almost as far north as we can, and we will open gates and let that playground flow during the day or the days we're not there, and close it up and make it a safe environment for the kids that are playing on the perimeter, the littles. And our kids are there probably an hour and 15, maybe an hour and a half every day when they're there for that approximately 7 weeks.
One question I have, in regards to our future discussions with OPN and Story, when would it be a reasonable expectation to have an answer on where the permanent location will be on Shot and Discus High School?
2 weeks.
That's it?
2 weeks.
Okay, so we could assure the community that
We can at least get an idea of some kind of an approach to be able to take in order to be able to kind of say, well, this is what we can, these are our options, this is what we could do. Okay. And we, if there's a couple of options, that'll give us some kind of choice. But I think within 2 weeks of...
Okay, so a stretch goal could be 2 weeks, but this fall we can tell the community this is the permanent location of Shot and Discus.
Yeah, we'll take some more time to be able to actually get it to work, but to get some kind of a concept, I think we can do that pretty quickly.
And then my other second comment is there is some benefit that Judge has talked about making some improvements to the fellows playground, which I think is great. So if you could talk about what you're planning to do with the field that's going to benefit the kids as well, the elementary kids as well.
You want some of that in? Yeah, right now, currently with our freshman practice field that we painted there, we've painted an additional soccer field for those kids and placed the goals that are out of the harm's way of our ninth graders. They're going to be using them approximately twice a week for freshman football practices. And then we've talked about concrete surfaces being used. However, we need to put 4 squares on those or any other markings to help their recess playground type of situation. We're willing to do it. Whatever it takes to make it work for everybody that's using that facility.
I just want to thank you. I know you're thinking about the greater impact of the community, so thank you.
So is the anticipation then that on the time when that's not being used, so out of season, that structure, that area could be used for temporary playground, for putting things there, for making it so basically it's another play structure for kids in a way to go through and use?
So when you look at it and you look at that diagram, there's a big fan that exposes or just defines the shot put drop area. That's all grass. There's no change. That's just where the shot puts will fling when they're thrown. We've got somewhere between 2,000 and 4,000 square feet of concrete. We've got about 5,000 square foot of the ag line where the shot put falls. There's about 90,000 square foot. There's almost 2 acres of green space there in that area that we're taking less than 10%. Half of that is, or more, is for the aggregate, and the rest of it is a small section of concrete. So, I mean, that's the net result impact of that site is what's happening, even with the temporary.
And then for people at home, I think it'd be important, Judge, we talked earlier, there might have been a perception earlier that Fellows is the one place that this type of temporary stuff is going on. But if I remember right, Meeker and potentially Sawyer might take some practice sites for different sports, things like that. I don't know if we touched on that earlier.
Meeker will have to be used for some soccer activity this spring. They've got a bigger footprint over there, more green space. We will have to have some soccer teams practicing over there this spring at times, and that's just simply moving some goals over there and painting, their boundaries on the grass that's already there, and the turf's in good shape for that. Also, we've made an extra effort, Jerry's staff has, to reinforce the turf at Fellows right now for the extra duty on it. That includes aerification, fertilization, spraying more for weeds, and we did throw a little water on it this year, the last month, to beef it up and make it stronger and thicker and softer for everybody. And we've done the same thing over at Meeker, getting ready for next spring for increased usage by our athletes, so that we don't turn it into a mud playground or a worn playground for the kids during recess and during the school day.
All right, we have a motion.
Just a quick question. No, you might have said it, but how many times do they, I know the time that they start, but how many times a week do the athletes?
Are you talking?
For the shot put and discus?
Shot and discus. 7 weeks. I'm looking back at my coaches, probably an average of 4 days a week. Those first couple of weeks coming out of spring break, we may be indoors. The weather may just be too cold and too nasty to even go. So I'd say on average of 4, and then we'll get into our track meets, and that starts pulling athletes away in all different directions about the first week of April. So some of the usage of the number of athletes going there will also start to decrease daily. It just ebbs and flows for about 7 weeks.
And I think it also would be convenient to speak with the school, because the littles get out at 2 or 5 on Wednesdays. So maybe if there's a practice that happens that day, then they still have a little bit of time on their own. So maybe some logistical work with the building itself, and you probably have done that.
We've started that with our current freshman football team. We've had that discussion with the new principal there. Yes, we will have deep talks with them, on-site visits. Let's work together. Let's communicate, over-communicate, and have a plan.
And like for the safety purpose of like who comes in into that, because maybe they might run into recess. So like all of those logistics pieces, I think they're important. We cannot overlook that a lot of those recesses go like right at 3, because it's such a big school.
And that'll be my job as the oversight of the athletic department to plan, communicate, and make sure we've got a plan that feels good for everybody, and it's safe and productive.
Do you think you could communicate that to the neighborhood as well? Because as we talked, that park ends up getting used as kind of a neighborhood park, and it'd be useful if through the social media accounts or whatever, they knew what to expect as parents, so they don't send their kids down there expecting to play.
Yeah.
We can work with our communications department after those conversations to make sure that our community is well aware of what that facility usage is going to look like, as well as what availability looks like.
And the other, I had another, do they practice like after like weekends? Is there,
No,
do
there'll
they use
be
it on weekends or just
very,
on their
very
own?
little practice
Would they
above
be
and
able-
beyond that. One thing I'll have to do with our athletes, as you heard from Gabe Greenlee earlier tonight, he likes to practice out of season. So we will have to think through that and put in some guidelines of when our kids can just go over there on their own and start throwing that shot and discus with no supervision around. And so that's part of this big jigsaw puzzle we're going to have to put together.
Thank you.
So the motion on the floor, it was moved by Bankin, seconded by Perez, to construct temporary shot and discus on Fellows property. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
Nay.
Passes 5-2. All right, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Rosser, seconded by Perez. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Thank you.